Randall Cunningham was one of the faces of the NFL in the late 80s and into the 90s, a dynamic quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings who could beat you with his legs along with his arm. Leading the Eagles in passing and rushing for 4 straight seasons seems like an obvious way to highlight his athleticism, but it's what he did outside of the quarterback position that will surprise most college football fans.
This is Distant Replay.
Thanks for pulling up another episode of Distant Replay. I am Ben George. Today we're sharing a wild college football fact that many people probably aren't aware of. I wasn't until this week, and that's that Randall Cunningham went into the College Football Hall of Fame as a punter. Now, let me give you a little backstory on how I came across this, and then we'll share a few stories and stats from his remarkable career. So just prepping for the college football season here in 2024, looking into UNLV, coming off a pretty nice football season, and have a couple of transfers coming in that I think could make a little bit of noise for the Running Rebels. And that's when I saw that Randall Cunningham went to UNLV. Now, I feel pretty tuned in with athletes and where they attended school. And for a lot of guys, you kind of know who they're attached to. But this is one that completely shocked me. I had no clue that Randall Cunningham went to UNLV. Now, I might be alone in that fact, but it's just something that I've never heard. You hear a lot of the UNLV athletes, right? Larry Johnson is a big one. But you never hear Randall Cunningham associated with the Running Rebels. So, number one, I thought that was interesting, and it caught me off guard. So I kind of went into digging into his career a little bit because I just was trying to wrap my head around the fact that this guy played at UNLV before going on to his remarkable NFL career. Now, who is Randall Cunningham? Most football fans are going to know this, right? You were going to recognize him for what he did with the Eagles. He was the face of Philadelphia for much of the 80s and into the 90s. He's a guy that if you grew up in Philadelphia, pretty good chance you probably had a Randall Cunningham jersey or starter jacket that you rep the Eagles with, or maybe had a Randall Cunningham poster on your wall. All this love and excitement and passion around the Eagles was thanks in large part to Randall Cunningham. He was a dynamic quarterback. His 11 seasons with the Eagles, he won the 1990 NFL MVP award. He averaged 8 yards per rush that season, which turns out was the third most in NFL history by someone with 100 attempts in a season. Just kind of speaks to how good this guy was, both running and passing. And you can elaborate on that a little bit by just looking at the stats for the Eagles, right? He led them, the franchise in passing, the team in passing and rushing, for each season from 1987 to 1990. That was when Cunningham kind of had his coming out party in the football world. He got injured, dealt with that a little bit, came back, and still was able to lead the Eagles to some success, playoffs, never could get over the hump, though. He moved to the Vikings in 1997, where a lot of you might actually remember Randall Cunningham because of that season in 1998 in which he led Minnesota to a 15-1 regular season. One of the great regular seasons of all time. Just the fact that he had the arm, you remember his arm, the fact that he could get it down the field, as good of an arm, a cannon, as anyone that's played the position. And with Randy Moss out there, along with Chris Carter, all I do is catch touchdowns. Randall Cunningham had a remarkable season. It was a fun season to watch. One of the great teams that I can remember watching growing up. But that season came to a halt in the NFC Championship. They lost in overtime to the Falcons, the Dirty Bird Falcons, that variety of Atlanta, in an overtime kick, I believe by Morton Anderson, and that was the end of the run there with the Vikings. He would play a few more seasons after that, but that was kind of the last hurrah for Randall Cunningham. Plenty of accolades in the NFL. I mean, you go down the list. He's not an NFL Hall of Famer. You can maybe make the argument that he should be in the discussion, but he still accomplished so much in his pro career. All-Pro, Pro Bowl, Comeback Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, led the NFL in passer rating, which is also the highlight of that 1998 season because it ended up being a pretty historic one for Cunningham. Led the league with 106 passer rating, while the Vikings scored a then NFL record 556 points. Now, that passer rating made him the first black quarterback to lead the league in that category. So he was a historic player, one that kind of changed the image of the position too, right? And a guy that a lot of people pulled for because he was so much fun to watch. Now, Let's talk a little bit now about the side of this player you might not be too aware of. I'm going to take you back to a divisional game with the Giants in 1989. It was the fourth quarter of a 17-17 game. The Eagles were backed up to their own 3-yard line. Okay, awful position to be in. All the momentum seems to be in the Giants' favor. Well, fourth down rolls around. Cunningham calls out to his head coach, who was Buddy Ryan at the time, told him, hey, let me kick it. Buddy, a player's coach, which he's been known for, one of the great coaches in NFL history, gave him the go-ahead. Now, let me stop right there, because this wasn't a complete surprise. Here's what you might not know. Cunningham was a first-team All-American punter for UNLV, okay? Going back to his career with the Running Rebels. That fact's even more remarkable when you consider that the best he did as a quarterback was honorable mention All-American honors. So that's the kind of impact he had as a punter. We're talking about UNLV's all-time passing and punting leader to this day. Passing and punting leader. Not a fluke either. He finished his 3-year career in Vegas with 142 punts, averaged greater than 45 yards per punt. In his final year, 1984, when UNLV won the Pacific Coast Athletic Association, the conference they were in at the time, they made their first bowl appearance. That season, Cunningham averaged more than 47 yards per punt. Just give you a little bit of context. Let's just look back to 2023, the last football season. We made a lot more advancements in form and skill and technology and training, right? Well, in 2023, only 6 players in college football averaged 47 yards per punt or better. So that season in 1984, you could put it with just about any. And that 45-yard average through 3 years, I mean, only 18 guys averaged 45 yards per punt in 2023. So it speaks to what he did at that time and why it still holds up in 2024. So when he gets drafted to Philly in the second round, they focus entirely on developing him as a quarterback. Makes a lot of sense, right? But he still spent some time in practice, punting a couple times a week just to make sure he stayed in form, just in case they needed him. They had a full-time punter. He wasn't one that they wanted to put at that position full-time, but he still continued to kick. And when you listen to the way he was described and why he wasn't kept on as a full-time punter, he had an erratic leg. He would have, say, 4 great kicks, and then his 5th one would be something that went 20, 25 yards, right? Shank. His special teams coach, Al Roberts, once said this about Randall. Randall has no form. You can talk mechanically and structurally about how to place the ball on the foot and the power zone, but Randall has such outstanding athletic ability. He just gets his foot on the ball, and God does the rest. You don't coach that. You just let it go. You just say, Randall, kick. Great way to describe him, and that right from the Eagles website, a report back when he was into the Hall of Fame, but speaks to his ability and just how blessed he was athletically. Now, back to that 1989 blistering cold day in Giant Stadium. Buddy Ryan trusted Cunningham in that critical situation, not having punted in 2 months for the Eagles. Keep that in mind. That ball was boomed across the 50 from his own 3 when he was backed up into the end zone. It skipped past the returner, Dave Meggett, for the Giants. Eventually, it was tracked down at the 9-yard line. 68 yards through the air, 91-yard punt in total. That would go down as the 3rd longest punt in NFL history. Still stands to this day. Just one more remarkable stat about Cunningham and his punting abilities. He only punted 12 times during his career with the Eagles, but still, to this day, holds 2 of the team's 3 longest punts ever. Now, this leads us all back to that wild college football fact that Randall Cunningham is in the College Football Hall of Fame, not as a quarterback, but as a punter. The rules to get into that Hall of Fame state you have to be a first-team All-American to qualify, so he couldn't do that as a quarterback, only as a punter, but he went in 2016, repping UNLV, still lives in Las Vegas to this day. But you look at his career, and I still can't believe, A, that he went to UNLV, but the fact that he was this remarkable of a punter, and it's just not a well-known fact, and you'll see it pop up on message boards from time to time, is pretty crazy and a wild fact that I wanted to share with you. One more for the road, too. Did you know that Randall Cunningham played with Ickey Woods at UNLV. Another guy I had no clue played at UNLV. He's infamous for his Ickey Shuffle, but he was also a teammate of Randall Cunningham's. That'll do it for us. We'll try to share some more facts, have some more fun shows coming your way. If you have a fun, wild, crazy stat or fact from college football, drop in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Maybe do a little episode on that in the future. Appreciate you listening as always. Please subscribe to the show on YouTube. We appreciate your support. Thanks for listening to Distant Replay.